Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results. Welcome back to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast on what is a magnificent Friday here in Melbourne. And I have the absolute pleasure today to bring in all the way from North Carolina in the United States of America, Mr. David Neagle. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. As we're recording this, I think it's late-ish, early evening in North Carolina. So nearly beer o'clock for you. I haven't quite got to the coffee yet on Friday morning here, but it's absolute pleasure. Isn't it great though, the technology? You can talk to anybody anywhere in the world and feel as if we are in the same room.
It's fantastic. And it's absolutely, back in the day, in the early 2000s, I used to do teleseminars for people in Australia, and I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, my time, to be able to do it for them when it was most convenient for them. So
and they wouldn't have had any idea what time it was. It would have been like you would have been up and about at your finest fettle.
Yeah. It was interesting. It was definitely interesting, but it worked,
That's awesome. David, you are the president of Life Is Now Inc. You're a speaker, a best-selling author, and even more importantly, or more relevantly, you're a podcast host.
I am.
You mentioned you've been running your podcast since 2017 and probably close to, if not over 1,000 episodes of the podcast called The Successful Mind. Just tell us a little bit about that. What's the core purpose of your podcast?
Well, the idea is that I really believe that everybody has a successful mind. They just don't know how to use it correctly.
Yeah.
And when they learn how to use it, there's nothing that they can't achieve in their life. And I know that because I was one of those people. I was definitely one of those people. And when I found out that changing my thinking could seriously change my results, I became so fascinated with it that I started studying it for about 7 years. And I said, this is what I want to dedicate my life to.
Yeah.
So that's what the podcast is. Like, we give our best in that podcast. We talk about everything in business, from sales to team building to vision, everything. So it's really wonderful. We have a lot of good reports back from people that listen to it.
Brilliant. It's the technology that's available today and the access, if you like, to information is never as easy as it is in 2025. But I'd be interested in your view on this. Still, with so much information available, there are still people who are either not looking at it, don't know it's there, or potentially ignoring it and saying, no, I'll be okay. I'm just going to continue to go down my path. So what's your view on that? Because there's lots of information available.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I also think that they don't know what information is good information and what isn't, right? So I tell people all the time, anything that I say to you is already on the internet someplace, right? It's already out there. I'm not going to tell you something new, but I think still people want a relationship with somebody that they can trust because they're, especially in business but any kind of self-improvement, they're making decisions to make changes in their life, and that's very serious to them, right? So just grabbing things, anything that's a significant change, they really want to know that it's going to work and it's worth their time and worth their money to do it. So, our business hasn't dropped because of the internet. It's only increased.
It's interesting, isn't it? And as you were talking, I'm thinking there's a phrase, I'm not sure who first said this, but often the things that are easy to do are also the things that are easy not to do. So when you mention the fact that there's so much information available to you in the internet, on books, on podcasts, and yet it probably comes down to the desire to want to learn, the desire to want to improve, and perhaps for some people, there might be a change of identity they need to go through in order to break through into that new, version of themselves. And for some, it might be a bit of a block for them.
Absolutely. You hear something that's interesting, right? So before the internet came out, we just had books, basically. Some people read those books, but I've never met anybody that is successful that just read books or just learned it off the internet. They had a mentor at some point in time in their
Yeah.
life. They needed somebody with real world experience to help them. So, like now we're facing AI, right? AI is amazing. It's going to have its downsides to it. But people have said to me, will what you do exist 5 years from now when AI is at its peak? And I'm like, yeah, because I don't see it any different than the intelligence that we've always had in print version,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be there. It's going to tell them what to do, but are
Mm.
they actually going to do it? Or do they need somebody? We're built for relationships, right?
Totally.
So yeah, that's my thought on it.
And look, I completely agree with that because I was doing a few workshops this week, and I was with a mining company, and they're a global mining company based here in Australia, and I was running a sales training for them, and the whole premise, the whole theme throughout the whole day was all about the fact that people do business with people first and foremost, right? So
Yep.
if you can build a good relationship because they know you, they like you, they trust you, but also they remember you, it really doesn't matter. And sometimes it might be an exception to this, but it really doesn't matter what product you're selling because they're buying you first. And so with artificial intelligence coming on, what I see potentially, and I've already started to see this in some areas, excuse me, that some are being too reliant on artificial intelligence. So when it comes to their moment to shine, they don't know what to actually say because all the stuff they have created up until that point has come from AI. And the question is, well, is that you or is that artificial intelligence saying things that you fed into it to then try to put it out to the marketplace? So
Right.
I totally agree. Totally agree.
And I don't know that artificial intelligence is going to necessarily give them the right answers when it comes to the human development perspective
Mm,
versus is it going to give it the common answer,
yeah.
right? Because it's searching all the data in the world, right? So
Yeah.
how does it know whether to answer from the common answer or what is the acceptable answer or somebody that actually knows something a little bit more than that? That might
Mm.
be very different.
Absolutely. So you've always got to check that and interrogate it and say, does this make sense to me? Is this aligned with what I believe? And if it is, go for it. But you still want to make sure it's you coming through, not some artificial bot that's actually a
Right.
generalist.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, David, I'd love to know. I always ask this question of my guests in terms of a little bit of background. And I know you've been running this business for a number of years now, but was there a moment in time that was the catalyst to put you onto this path? Or because when I talk about sales, I don't think I've ever had anybody come to me and says, you know what, Darren, I'd wanted to be in sales since I was 5 years old, and I went to university. I went to sales university. That's all I ever wanted to be.
Right. You know, um, what's interesting is that there were several times in my childhood and my young adult life that I was exposed to sales. Like I had a lemonade stand when I was a kid. We sold bakery on the corner in Chicago. When I was a teenager, to make extra money, we would buy cars that needed to be, broken down junks
Yeah.
that needed to be repaired, put a couple $100 in it, sell it for a couple thousand. But it never related to me like this was any kind of a business or, a skill or whatever. In 1988 and 89, I worked for Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. I sold life insurance and homeowners and auto and that stuff for them.
Yeah.
And still nothing was clicking in my mind. But the thing that changed everything for me was I quit high school when I was 17 and I
Hmm.
learned no other skills. So I got married, I had two kids, and we could not afford to live. We ended up on food stamps here in the United States. We had our car repossessed. We lost everything. And I was working for a food distributor here that he was the biggest importer in the United States. He brought food all over the world. He brought food in and distributed it to grocery stores.
Yeah.
And my job was to drive a forklift and fill those trucks. And I was a terrible employee. I had a terrible attitude. And for 2 years, I kept thinking to myself, I've got to figure out a way to go back to university. I never go to university, period, because I never went.
Yeah. Sure.
So I tried, but here was my obstacle. I'm working 6.5 days a week. I don't have enough money for us to make it now.
Yeah.
I need to come up with more money to go. This is before the internet. So for 2 years, I tried everything that I could think of. Nothing. I just couldn't make any more money. And then one night, I had the worst night of my life. I got disciplined twice before I started work. I was almost fired. The other person who was supposed to help me on the dock didn't show up. Everything was going wrong. I was sick. I had the flu. It was cold. It was Chicago in February. And I was in the back of this trailer and I just broke down sobbing, crying. And I said, God, show me something because I don't know
Yeah.
how to get out of this. I'll do whatever. Just tell me, show me something. And a voice in my head said, David, change your attitude. And I'm like, what was that? And I stopped.
What?
I composed myself and I looked around and it was really wild. Anyway, long story short, I started thinking about what is an attitude? How do I change it? I took the owner of the company that I worked for because he started this company in his garage
Yeah.
in his suburb of Chicago. So I could relate to him some way, right? And I said, what are the three things that are different between me and him? And I came up with these three things. He loves what he does. He does everything to the best of his ability and he treats people with total respect. That's what stood out to me. I said, I'm going to start doing those three things. 30 days later, my income tripled. I
In
went from
30
20
days.
in 30 days, in 30 days. And I'm sitting around going, this can't be happening. Like, how is this even possible? I was making 62,000. Nobody in my family was making that much money. Nobody from the neighborhood that I grew up in was making that. I didn't know anybody personally that made that much money. And I said, I don't know what I did. Everybody around me told me I got lucky. But I said, somebody must be talking about this. So I started reading and I drove here's how little money we made. I had to live 100 miles away from work because anything closer I couldn't afford. So I drove
100 miles.
100 miles. So I drove 100 miles to work and 100 miles home every day for 7 years.
Wow.
For 7 years. So I turned it into a library. I used to listen to cassette tapes, right? I got Tony Robbins' personal power tapes when they first came out. I got every self-help book that I can think of, business books, biographies, everything, speeches, seminars, everything I could get on tape. And I started slowly putting these pieces together as to what happened to me. How did this happen? At the same time, in this company that I was working for, I went to the top of the company. I was in charge of expanding the company across the country. Started off as a truck driver delivering diesel fuel for this company, went to the top. And then I met my mentor in 1996. And he took me the rest of the way. And in 1999, I started this company, Life Is Now. So that
Wow.
was the thing that really switched everything for me was that breakthrough.
Wow. Um, that is that, and I talk a lot about the hero's journey. You just described the in perfect detail a number of steps of the hero's journey, right?
Yeah.
And I guess the challenge where you were talking about, hey, God, give me something, give me some sign, and then all of a sudden there's change your attitude is the call to adventure. Now, thinking back, how easy was it for you to have discarded that and say, nah, that's just, I'm just not gonna do it. I'm just gonna keep plowing on. What was it I mean, then you looked at your boss and you asked those three questions, but what was it that pushed you or incentivized you to take that first step?
Well, one of the things was, so this was in 1993. Excuse me. In September of 1989, my son was born in June. I had an older daughter, and we were busy, we were broke, we were exhausted. My mother said to me one day, "We're going to go out with your uncle on his boat on the Illinois River. We're going to do some water skiing and stuff. Why don't you come? See if your sister-in-law will watch the kids. Come out, take a day off, right? Get
Yeah.
away from everything." So we went, and I was water skiing behind this boat, and I fell or something. And I didn't know where I was, but I got separated from the boat. So while they're trying to turn around and come back and get me, I pass a sign in the water, like I'm going with the current. It's a river. It says, "Danger, stay clear 300 feet." And I turned and looked, and it was a giant dam with a spillway.
Oh no. Oh no.
I got sucked through that dam. I got sucked through it. I was one of only two people that ever survived going through it. And that's a whole nother long story. But when I got out of that situation, I thought to myself, oh my God, like death is real. I'm like 20, what was I, 20, I was 23 years old when that happened. And it woke me up. What 23-year-old cares about death? You think you're invincible at 23,
That's
right? I
right.
didn't care about it. But I realized it was stunning to me. I thought I was having the time of my life 5 minutes before I was fighting for my life.
Yeah.
And I thought, and then everybody kept saying this to me. There's a reason God saved you. There's a reason that you're here. Somebody's looking down on you.
Yeah.
And I asked myself, is that true? Is like, am I
Yeah.
really here to do something? So that got in my head. And it gave me a sense of urgency that I didn't have before. But to answer the question, I don't think if I would have been as desperate as I was, I think I would have blew that idea off
Yeah.
because it wasn't the first time somebody said that to me. When I was a kid, I was a terrible student. The teachers would call my father in and they would say, David's a pretty bright guy, but he's got a terrible attitude.
Mm.
So I had been hearing it my whole childhood, but nobody, my parents didn't know what that meant, right?
Yes.
So all they did was ground me. They'd be like, go to your room, you take all your privileges away, you study till your next report card, right? And I spent my whole, in high school, that stopped. They really couldn't do that anymore. But up until that point, they did it all the time. And
Yeah.
they never came in and said, let me show you how to study, or even, or what's wrong? What's going on with him? I probably have ADHD, right? I just was, if I wasn't interested in it, I couldn't learn it. But if
Yeah.
I was interested in it, it was like I had a photographic memory and nobody noticed that about me.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
Mate, that is incredible. And I mean the key message there, because sometimes people listen to a story like that, and that is an amazing story. And they might justify for themselves to say, well, that's all right for David. I've never had a near death experience or a position in my life where I've had to look at mortality and really have a pattern interrupt that's forced upon me. And so they can use that as an excuse not to take some form of action. So looking back, that was, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but that might have been a catalyst for you to really wake up and start getting
yeah,
a sense of
I agree.
urgency.
I agree.
But it doesn't mean you have to have that sort of an experience for
No,
a sense of urgency to be created.
no, it does not. In fact, I have people say the exact same thing that you said to me. I
Yeah,
didn't have that. I didn't have that,
yeah,
that issue. And I tell them, you don't have to. I'm like, I was stubborn, right? You don't have to have that. The real key is what do you really want? If you
yeah,
could tell me what you want, I can show you how to get it.
yeah.
So I get people thinking proactively for
Mm,
what they want.
mm,
Um, and we start from there. And I find the ones that really do want to make a change, they will buy into that, and we start digging there. Like, what is it you want?
yeah,
Let's put something together, figure out how you can get it, and I'll teach you.
yeah, absolutely. So the fact that you've gone from driving the forklift, driving the truck, doing deliveries to in 30 days, tripling your income, to then not long after that, to expanding the business and expanding the company and being a senior executive within the organization. Looking back now, because you mentioned the word attitude, change your attitude. So if you can change
Yeah,
your attitude, if you're passionate about what you're doing, you love what you're doing, and you do it with, with service, anything can happen. People might listen to this and say, well, that's all well and good because we've all heard the movie The Secret, and I'm a big fan of, as I knew of Bob Proctor and all the stuff
yeah,
that he talks
yeah. He
about.
was my mentor for seven
Yeah,
years.
there you go. So, and you work with him directly.
Yes, we worked. Not only did I work with him directly, we actually had a company together for a few years.
Nice. Nice. So the thing that I'm trying to get people to understand is you've got to have your thinking right, you've got to have your attitude right, but you also have to, and Bob talked about this a lot, you've still got to take action. So
Right.
um, do you have people say to you still, "Oh, David, you must have been lucky. You must have been in the right place at the right time. How lucky are you to have been mentored directly by Bob Proctor? How lucky are you to be connected to Gary Vaynerchuk? You must have it really easy. The path of gold must be rolled out for you."
Well, I don't have the latter part of that statement. I don't have people, I don't, people will ask me what it was like to work with Bob. because they're very interested in him.
Mm.
And I'll tell them what it was like to work with Bob. But they don't really say that from that perspective. What they do say though is you're just lucky. And mostly that comes from like my family.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
my family, this is the God's truth. They do not understand how I make money.
Okay.
It does not compute in their
Yeah.
mind, right?
Yeah.
And for a long time, I wanted them to be able to recognize that I did something successful because I was like the first successful person, in our lineage.
Yeah.
But they just didn't get it, right? And they rejected it vehemently. So from them, my old friends before I changed friends back 20 years, 25 years ago, those
Yeah.
people, you're just lucky. They could not get past the idea of this was the David that we knew before. And here's this new David. Like it didn't compute in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way. There's just no way that it's the same guy. You must have gotten a break. Somebody gave you something. Somebody did something for you. I've even had people say, are you doing something illegal? Like, is it a cult you're in? Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. My ex-wife's family used to say to her, you guys are in a cult. Like,
Yeah.
like, like we're business consultants. How is it a cult? Like, but yeah. So there's a lot of that out there. I don't get it at me too much anymore,
Yeah.
but I did for a lot of years.
Yeah. And I mean, and talk about then, because we'll talk about sales and love to talk to you about discipline and some key sales skills and so forth. But uh, what do you say to people who are coming up against that? Particularly some of the biggest critics and harshest critics can sometimes be those closest to you. How much resilience did you have to build? Um, and how challenging was that?
I had to build a lot of resilience, and it was very challenging for a period of time. I'm not
Mm.
going to sugarcoat that. It was. In fact, uh, out of the thousands of people that I've worked with over the years, the number one thing that sets business people back when they first start is adjusting to the adjustment that their family has to go through.
Yeah.
Because they're different. They're thinking different. They're trying to be positive. They're making a lot more money. People don't get it, and they behave immaturely around that. So it was rough for a while. The I do a talk for people called "You're the First,"
Hmm.
and it's for business people or anybody that's the first person in the family to become successful, and why they're the first, and what's the responsibility behind that, and how to think about it from a creative perspective. And I also bring in a spiritual element into
Hmm.
that talk, and
Yeah.
it really seems to help. Like when people feel like they're not being selfish, that they're actually here for a reason and a purpose, and
Mm.
it's really their duty in life to step into that purpose. It helps them make that switch. And I find the reason of it is this. Most adults are subconsciously still operating with other people as the authority in their mind. They never make that switch, right? I mean, consciously they know they're adults, but unconsciously their mind is still operating from that programming.
Yes.
When they switch that authority over, right, to God or spirit or the universe, something that works for them, they're able to make a much easier transition because they believe something completely different.
Mm.
The voice in their head is saying that they're selfish, right? So this gives them a different perspective on it. And for most of the people that I work with, it seems to work relatively well.
Nice. So you work with a lot of business people, entrepreneurs. No doubt there'll be salespeople within that as well, and people who just want
Yes.
to develop themselves in a personal or professional sense. Uh, what's your what's your view on sales? So how do you've been in sales for a lot of years, right? And by
Yes.
the way, we're
Yeah.
all in sales. I love asking this question of salespeople. Do you like being sold to, David?
Yes. Yeah. If the person knows what they're doing, absolutely.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I want to deal with good salespeople. I like to buy things, right?
That's
So
it.
I like an educated person that has my best interest in heart.
That's it.
And and yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
my personal belief is the foundational fundamental skill that builds all of business is first the sales skill,
Hmm.
because that you have to know, you have to have that in every part of your business,
Mm.
right? You have to have it in hiring. You have to have it in vision casting in the business. You have to have it in management. You have to have it in anything that you're doing that's new. Somebody is always selling
Mm.
to those people. If they have what I see is if they have it, if they will develop it,
Yeah.
their business is much easier. And the other thing is that they can fundamentally bring in whatever amount of money they need whenever they need
That's it. That's it.
it. That's
It,
it.
and the reason I ask that question is I am staggered at the number of people that I ask, hey, do you like to be sold to? How many people say absolutely not? But you said the perfect response that you like to buy, right? So the
Yes.
people who like to buy, by definition, enjoy being sold to because the person selling to them is doing it not for what they can get, it's what service they can provide. So
Right.
I've for many years had the philosophy that in any realm, whether it be entrepreneurship, corporate, retail, sales is the ultimate form of service, the ultimate form of service. And
I
my
agree
job
100%.
is to identify whether you have a problem that you want to solve or you need to solve, and then I'll provide a solution for that. I'm not then going to push you, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to buy.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of people out there that are not in sales, and they think of sales as being, well, they're very pushy type people. They're going to try and retrofit a product into something that I don't need, but they're going to force me to do it and close at all costs and all that sort of stuff. There's so many people out there, and this is coming back, I guess, to the universe of spiritual realm. There's a plethora of customers out there. You don't have to close the customer right in front of you. So
Right.
it's it's the law of abundance, if you like. There's so many out there. So I love to talk to you about all of that in terms of selling. And you mentioned that discipline is the key to closing sales consistently. So part of it obviously is attitude. You have to have a great attitude and you have
Yep.
to believe in your product and so forth. But um, just talk about your philosophy around discipline and why that's important.
So Bob Proctor's definition of discipline was your ability to give yourself a command and follow it. I tell people if you will develop the character and the standard inside of yourself to be your word when you say you're going to do something, there's nothing that you can't accomplish.
Mm.
But if you don't do it, you will fail at almost everything. And being that sales is fundamentally the first thing that I think people need to really master, the idea behind it is that number one, you have to, well, you said it, right? Like, I believe everybody's buying all the time. I never
Yeah.
see anybody not buying. Everywhere you go, people are buying, right? So people are buying. Everybody has, well, based on your product or service, there is just millions of people that your product or service benefits. They want you to bring that into their life, right?
Mm.
They're waiting for you to bring it into your life. You have to have the expectation of that. And I also think that you have to see yourself as, like a welcome person in their life and not like some kind of bad interruption, right? Like, I assume people are going to be want to hear me
Yes.
when I come into their life or I'm speaking
Yes.
on a stage or wherever I'm doing it. Um, I think that you have to decide what you want, and then you have to break it down to what are the sales activities that I have to do to get that job done. I think that in sales, the number one thing that we're doing in that greatest act of service is we're helping a person get clear on whether they're 100% in their yes or they're 100% in their no,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Every company on the planet gets more no's than they get yeses,
Yeah.
right? You think of a company like McDonald's, right? Where it's like one of the biggest companies in the world, but more people drive past it and go somewhere else than actually stop at McDonald's.
Yes.
So if you understand that and you understand what it is that you're looking for, your job is to find the people that have the need and the desire for what you want, and then for you to help them get clear on why they're going to buy this from you,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So having said that, I also think that you have to be comfortable with money,
Mm.
right? Because I see people that start to get relatively good at sales, but what crushes them is their own conflict with money or how much
Yeah.
money they're making or how much money they're selling. They bring their immature relationship with sales into the sales conversation,
Hmm.
right? So I I have a program called the Matrix. It's a sales program. It's an advanced sales program. And one of the things that I have people look at very hard is what is their relationship with money? How do they spend money and how do they buy?
Hmm.
Right? Are they buying from the perspective of the value of the product or the service, or is their number one value to save money?
Yeah,
Right? If your number one value is to save money, how are you going to influence somebody else to spend more when you're a contradiction to that own problem? I think that just
fascinating,
crushes people.
fascinating. Because what that then says, David, is if you have a focus on saving, and you're the type of person who will go and go to a coffee shop, and you'll go to a different coffee shop if you can save $1 on your cup of coffee. When it comes to selling, you'll start to project that onto your customers, and then you'll start to get reflected back on you to you the fact that
Right,
you're too expensive, we need to get a discount, etc.
right. I've got a bunch of clients right now that are going through this themselves. And I said, number one, um, the idea is that you recommend the product that's best for them. Okay. I don't believe in putting a smorgasbord of products out there. You're the professional, right?
Yes.
They're coming to you. Recommend what's best for them. Don't go by price. And then whatever they do, ask full, you want full price. You want to pay
Yeah.
full price. And they said to me, well, what do we do when they ask for money off? I said, tell them no. Tell them no. And I haven't had anybody come back to me that has said they didn't buy. They're
Yep.
like, I can't believe it. They're saying yes. I'm like,
Hmm.
that's because they want what you have. I
Yeah.
said, this is in your head that people won't buy, right? Because you won't buy. You make
Yeah.
decisions based on money versus value. That
And
has to change to be a great salesperson. I'm very convinced of it.
well, it's interesting you say that because there's a number of salespeople, particularly in the corporate space, that are selling multi-million dollar deals, and yet they have customers that are haggling over small percentage points, which equates to very small amounts of money in the context of the whole deal. And I
Right.
asked them the same question: why are you even entertaining a discount? Do you believe in the value that this product is going to deliver to that customer? But more importantly, does that customer understand the value in terms of dollar terms, either positive or not so positive in terms of saving money or minimizing impact, to the point where you take that off the table? And Bob used to talk about this all the time. You break it down into the ridiculous. Right? It's just
Yes.
you're asking
Yes.
me for a $1,000 discount on a deal that's worth $2 million. Really?
Yeah.
Really? What's going
Yeah.
on with that?
Yep. Absolutely. That's exactly what he would say all the time. They I have somebody that works for me. She's been with me for 16, 17 years now. She grew up in Janesville, Wisconsin. Her name is Steph Tuss. She's an amazing coach. And she grew up in an environment where you got more accolades for how much money you saved on a product than you did for the product yourself. So like let's say she bought a shirt or a pair of jeans or a pair of
Yeah.
shoes or something. The first thing would be how much money did you save, right? So she would walk in and say, check this out, this new shirt that I got, and I got it for 20% off. That's the best. And that's where they got the approval from.
Yes.
So when you're raised with that, it makes you feel stupid to not follow that rule.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't I save money if I can? That's
Mm.
what's going on in their mind.
Yeah. It's crazy. So with that, a salesperson, a sales leader, entrepreneur who is having challenges with that, and perhaps they're not converting as much as they could be, are there some tangible things that you can suggest for them to start to flip the script a little bit away
Yes,
from this scarcity mindset into a more of an abundance mindset?
yes. The first thing I tell them to do, I don't tell them to spend beyond their means, but I tell them to do not buy anything that's on sale or that you have to cut a coupon out or you're looking for anything like that.
Yeah.
Completely stop that. Allow yourself to pay full price. And they'll always say to me, why would I do that?
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, let me ask you a question. Do you want full value for what you buy? Yes. So if you want full value for what you buy, why would you offer somebody less than that right? When they have a family, they're trying to feed their family, trying to put their kids through college. Why
Mm.
would you offer somebody less than that? Would you want somebody to offer you less? And they're like, no, I wouldn't want somebody to ask me for less. But I'm like, so then why would you do it with somebody else? And it always comes down to that that's what they were taught. They
Yeah.
have no logic behind it. Here's another thing. I'll say, let's say that you're going to go, you see something that you want to buy, it's 20% off, it's $100. Okay. They will always tell you they saved 20 bucks. And I say, yeah, that's what we've been programmed to believe. But you actually spent 80.
Mm.
You're $80 less in your bank. You're not
Yes.
$20 more than when you started,
That's it.
right? And they said, well, I would buy it anyway. I'm like, most of the things you wouldn't. I said, you buy them because you're being marketed and advertised to. You
That's
think
it.
it's your own decision. I said,
Yeah.
but those ideas are being put in your mind. And then they get you to come in to think, oh, you could get it now and you get 20% off.
Yeah.
And then you go home and go, I saved $20. But in actuality, you're $80 less than you were before. I
Yes.
said, we're trained to be amazing spenders, but we're not trained to be amazing earners.
Yes. And that's the difference. And you're so right. You look at all the advertising across all the medias, it's all about save this, buy now, get this instant gratification, and also in that process creating the fear of missing out or FOMO to say you must get this, which they're using the Cialdini law of scarcity to make
Yeah,
sure that hey, I'm compelled to go and do things because if I miss out, then what does that mean for me in the status of where I sit within the ecosystem?
right. And and the other thing that I would add to that is when you start paying full price, you raise your own self-worth. I'm worth it. Why would I do that? Because you're worth it.
Mm,
What do you mean I'm worth it? Well, here's the idea. The idea is that when you see you're worth the best and you're worth spending the best, you will attract the best on the other side when you go to sell,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
that'll be the value that you look for in your ideal client.
yeah, 100%. As you're talking, I'm thinking in professional services, in consulting, what we do, in coaching, any sale of any product. If you want to be positioned as a premium provider, you've got to have the attitude and the belief that I am valued at that, if not multiples of that price that the customer's going to spend. And so you'll have no hesitation to say no when people are asking for discounts. But you know what I've just realized? I've just realized probably the last 12 to 18 months. I have not had a single customer who's engaged me to do any sort of workshop or coaching that has actually asked for a discount.
That's great. That's the way
I've
it
just
should be.
I've literally just realized that. Um, which says, hey, maybe all the work I've been doing, David, is starting to pay off.
Yeah. Well, the value around the world is work harder. And I don't believe in that value. I think we
Mm,
should be diligent in our work, but I think what we do should be relatively easy. It's ease of effort.
yeah.
That's what Bob taught me. That's what changed my life. That's what made me make millions of dollars instead of struggling. Because he said to me one day, I was trying to go from 50,000 a year to 50,000 a month.
Yeah.
I had just started the business. And he said to me, why would you work all year for $50,000? And I'm like, knock it off, stop it, right?
Come on, Paul.
He goes, no, I'm serious. He goes, I wouldn't even get out of bed for 50,000 and you work all year for it.
Yes.
So I set this goal that I was going to get to 50,000 a month that month. I totally did not do it. It was worse. I didn't get any ahead at all. He said the same thing to me at the end of that month. He goes, where did you end up? I said, you don't even want to know. It's worse than where I started.
Yeah.
He goes, I'm telling you, it's easier to make 50,000, right? Now, Bob was not one that would necessarily tell you exactly what to do because he
Yeah.
wanted to teach you how to think.
Yes.
So the second month I tried it, blew it again, didn't do it. Third month, he goes, look, he said, this is where he came out with where he said to me, I wouldn't, you work all year for 50,000. I wouldn't even get out of bed for 50,000. And I got off the phone with him and I thought, oh, he really means it's easier. Like he's not messing with that idea. So
Yeah.
I said, okay, if this was as easy as it could be, what would it look like? And I thought, well,
Yeah.
I'd have one client for 50,000. Now, I didn't value myself yet that much. So I said, So I went from $495 to 15,000. I hit the 50,000 in 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
then shortly after that, I went over 1 million because it clicked. It's like, I get it. I
Yeah.
totally get it.
And so, as you talked before about helping clients sell at higher prices, that's the paradigm shift. And in terms of being able to do that, you've got to first of all believe that you are worthy of that, and second of all, the service you provide is of value to that or even more, and put it out there, and
Yeah.
don't be afraid of that.
Right. And there's no shortage. Like you said, it's only in abundance. There's
That's
only
it.
an abundance. So what are you trying to save nickel and dimes for when it's costing you your life?
Mm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, as you look back on that, what was the key lesson going from the 495 and not hitting that $50,000 a month goal in the first 2.5 months to then being able to do it? What did you learn? What was the key lesson that you learned from that process?
The key lesson was, and this really amazed me, my mind was mapping out the work, making it hard. Like it was because when I worked for those 7 years for this petroleum company, I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. That
Mm,
was I doubled down on work ethic because I didn't want to be broke anymore.
yeah.
So that was the strategy, and it worked. I didn't make much more money, but I went to the top of the company. So I was approaching that in my business when I first started, working just 7 days a week. I wouldn't get off
Yeah.
the phone. I was constantly doing it. And when I had this shift, I thought to myself, and I looked at the math because hindsight's 2020. It made sense after I said, what would be the easiest way? But before that, I didn't realize that my mind was trying to figure out this problem with the assumption that it needs to be hard.
Mm,
And I was like, holy cow, that's crazy. Like everybody must do this
yeah.
because that's how we're raised. It's got
Yeah.
to be hard. You got to struggle. You got to suffer, and you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and I know you mentioned before the podcast, you're a friend of Gary Vee's, and Gary Vee often talks about the hustle, right? And so I'd love your take on that because when I hear you talking, I hear, okay, it's not just hard work. You've got to know what you're doing. You've got to be good at it, and you've got to have a good profile and so forth. You've got to have the discipline to do the things that are required, but it's more about working smarter than it is working harder.
Right.
So for people who, I mean, and Gary Vee is one of the biggest influencers in the world.
Yes, he
For
is.
the clients that are influenced by that, how do you sort of manage the, I guess, the balance or the dynamic between working really, really hard and the perception that if you're not working hard, doing things at 2 o'clock in the morning, you'll never make it versus, hey, take a step back, have a life. You are a human being. You can still add value and you can still have abundance. How do you sort of marry that tension up?
So the idea is that most people are taking their business or sales and they're approaching it from, I have to go get a new customer. I have to get a sale. I have to hit a quota, right?
Yeah.
I change that and flip it over on its head. I'm like, you're not going out there trying to get anything. You're going out there giving, right? You're
Yes.
going out in service. Gary himself will tell you, right? Give everything your best. Like when I started my podcast, he said to me, he goes, make sure that you put your best material on the podcast.
Yes.
And I said, like everything? And he goes, everything. I'm like, well, what are they going to buy if I put it out there for free? And he totally changed my mind around that. He's like, number one, they will always buy from you because they want the personal contact. He
Yes.
said, but if you put your best out, you'll get your best back.
Yes.
And I made sense from what I understood about how the laws work and everything. That made sense. But I never thought about putting it out there for free. So that's what I started doing. I'm giving, right? Because the law of cause and effect says give and you'll receive. It doesn't say go get, right? Get comes from the idea that you're starting with lack and you're
Yes.
not. You're
Yes.
starting with an abundance. You have something wonderful to give.
Love it. Love it. Which is the law of sowing and reaping, which Jim Rohn used to always talk about. Just sow and sow and sow. And Bob used to talk about this all the time. Just give and give and give. And when you've given everything, give some more without any expectation of anything in return. But
That's right.
you will be taken care of. And I say this to
Yep.
sales teams and sales leaders all the time to do that and be of service and add value, and you'll actually receive. But you don't do it in order to receive because that becomes a
Right.
transaction. Love it.
Exactly.
So, Matt, I'm really conscious of time. We've got a hard finish shortly. I love, and we might have already touched on some of these, but I'd really like to hear from you your top two or three key sales skills or key skills in order for us to be successful in selling, whether it be selling ourselves, selling a service, selling a product. And we
Okay.
might have already touched it, but let's wrap a bar around this.
Well, so here's this is like if you do this, it will change everything. The first question that you ask somebody in a sales conversation is some version of this. What do you really want?
Mm,
Now, the reason for this is because it's the most intimate question you can ask another human being. If they're going to answer from their heart on what they really want, that's something they don't share with everybody. And in many cases, they don't even know it
mm,
until you start asking the question. The
yeah.
number one question we should ask ourselves is, what do I really want? Right. And then develop the self worth to explore what that is inside of ourselves. But you know how all the old sales books would say, develop rapport and do this and, say these things. If you sit there and you genuinely ask in the right tone of voice, tell me what it is that you really want,
Yeah.
right? Darren, I'm so happy that we're talking on the phone today. I'd like to start off by asking you, what do you really want?
Yeah.
And stay in that place until you get an emotional answer.
Mm,
The rest of that conversation will go brilliantly because they're talking about something. You're not telling them what they want. You're not even suggesting what they want.
mm,
They're telling you from their truth, from their integrity, right?
yes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes all the difference in the world. And they trust you and they have rapport with you and they feel like you're your best friend because almost nobody asks people, what do you really want?
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's
when you
not a
ask that question,
conversational piece.
no, it's not. It's like, so back in the day, we used to ask customers, what keeps you up at night? Which is
Sure.
which is
Yeah,
coming from a position of pain, thinking, and I still believe that there's problems we have to solve because people have problems, but flipping that and saying, what do you really want is a really powerful question. And then listening to the answer and creating space to listen to the answer, not presupposing what you think they want or what you
that's
want
right.
them to want.
That's right. The second thing is shut up. Stop telling them all about you and your company and your product or your service. But when you ask a question, literally put your phone or your Zoom on mute. Do not make another sound. And the reason for this is that when you ask, what do you want? Their mind is automatically reacting. They don't think to themselves, should I answer this question? No, they're already programmed to answer the question. So you
Yeah.
bypass the first barrier and they answer, but they're answering in a flow, and you want that flow to come out because that they're going to tell you everything. But if you sneeze or cough or you tap on the desk or whatever, the subconscious mind has to react to the sound because we're human beings. There's no choice. The more you do that, the more out of flow you put that person. So, and like when I listen to sales calls for people, silence. It's like the number one violation that they have. They can't shut up. They're constantly talking, even sounds of agreement like, uh-huh, yeah, okay, I hear you. No, not in a sales conversation. Never in a sales conversation. Let the person stay in the flow of what they want.
So what you're saying is, if you're on a Zoom call or if you're in a meeting with somebody, get some tape and put it over your
Yeah, pretty
mouth.
much. Pretty much. When I started learning this, I used to put my phone on mute because this was way before Zoom.
Yeah,
And I'm like, I don't want to make any noise because I know that that'll cause their subconscious to react. And I want them to be able to get inside themselves to what they really want. Right.
yeah, yeah.
And it works. It works unbelievably.
Brilliant. Love that. So people listening to this, ask the question, what do you really want? And then shut up.
And then
And
shut up.
through that process, get really comfortable with silence.
Right. Absolutely.
David, uh, absolute gold, my friend. I want to thank you for being on the podcast. Before we wrap up, love to know where can people learn a bit more about you? Where can they connect with you? Learn more about what you do? Where can they get your podcast? And anything else that might be able to be of assistance for them?
Yeah, thank you for that. So the podcast is the Successful Mind Podcast. It's on all podcast channels. It's usually in the top of the business podcasts. We have something though that'll help people with this kind of stair step their way. It's called the Quantum Leap Blueprint. And you've got a link. I guess you'll put it in the drop down or
Yep.
whatever if anybody is interested in that.
Yep.
It's totally free. It'll take you through a process. It'll help you get what it is that you want. It'll help you get it faster because that was my whole journey. Like I got it fast. So I've never taught people slow. I'm like, let's do this quick. You'll be happier with it. And the results will, it'll make a huge difference in your life. So they could go there. The other thing is, our website is lifeisnowinc.com or lifeisnow.com.
Yeah.
But really the podcast and the Quantum Leap Blueprint, go there. That'll help you the most.
Brilliant. I'll make sure I put those in the show notes, and I'll absolutely encourage people to do that, and I'll be doing that as soon as I jump off this podcast myself. So,
Right on.
David, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being such a great guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com, and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.